The night Elinor came home with a small envelope hidden inside her coat, she already knew something was wrong. She had spent 32 years believing that family meant protection. She had sacrificed her youth for her children. She had worked through sickness. She had paid every bill when her husband died. She had even sold the jewelry her mother left her so that her children could finish college. But that night she finally understood something painful. Her family had never seen her sacrifices as love. They had seen them as a source of money. Elinor parked her car outside her large, quiet house and looked through the window before entering. The lights were on even though she had told everyone she would be late. Her son Daniel was sitting in the living room with his wife Melissa. Her daughter Rachel was there too. They were speaking quietly. The moment Elinor opened the door, their conversation stopped. Daniel stood up quickly and smiled. "Mom, you are finally home." Elinor smiled back. Yes, it was a long day. Melissa walked toward her and took her coat. "You look tired. You should rest." Elinor watched her carefully. Melissa had never taken her coat before. Something felt different. She went upstairs without saying anything. Inside her bedroom, she locked the door and opened the envelope. There were 3 new bank cards inside. Elinor stared at them for several seconds. She had changed every account. Her savings account was moved to a different bank. Her investment account had been transferred into a protected trust. Her emergency fund had been placed under a private financial structure. Most importantly, she had removed every person who had access to her money. Daniel had been using her credit card for years. Rachel had been receiving monthly transfers from her account. Melissa had convinced Elinor to add her as an authorized user, after telling her that it would make household expenses easier. Elinor had trusted them until 3 days earlier. That was when she had accidentally overheard Daniel talking on the phone. She had been standing behind the kitchen door when she heard him say something that made her blood run cold. "She will never know. Once we get the house and the accounts, everything will be ours." A second voice had laughed. "And what happens to her?" Daniel had answered without hesitation. "She can live somewhere else." Elinor had stood there silently. Her own son had already planned her disappearance. She had not confronted him. Instead, she had gone to a lawyer. Now everything was changed. She looked at the new cards again and whispered, "You wanted everything. Tonight you will learn what happens when everything disappears." The next morning, Daniel came into the kitchen while Elinor was making coffee. "Mom, can you give me your card?" Elinor turned around. "Why? I need to pay the contractor." "Which contractor?" "The one working on the house." Elinor smiled. "I already paid him." Daniel froze. "You did?" "Yes." Daniel looked toward Melissa. Melissa quickly entered the kitchen. "Elinor, we need to talk about the monthly expenses, of course." Melissa lowered her voice. "Your account seems to have stopped working." Elinor slowly placed her coffee cup on the table. "My account, yes. The card declined yesterday." Elinor smiled again. "That is strange." Daniel stepped closer. "Mom, what did you do?" "Nothing." "Did you change your bank?" Elinor looked directly into his eyes. "Why would you ask that?" Daniel could not answer. For the first time he looked afraid. That afternoon, Rachel came home crying. "Mom, my card is not working." Elinor hugged her. "I am sorry." Rachel pulled away. "You did this." Elinor remained calm. "Did what? You changed the accounts? Who told you, Daniel?" Elinor nodded. "Then you should ask Daniel why he knew." Rachel became silent. That evening, the whole family gathered in the living room. Daniel slammed his hand against the table. "We are your children." Elinor looked at him. "Yes. So why are you treating us like strangers?" Elinor took a slow breath. "Because strangers never planned to steal my life." Everyone became silent. Melissa looked at Daniel. Rachel looked at the floor. Elinor stood up and walked toward the stairs. But before she reached them, Daniel shouted, "You cannot do this to us." Elinor stopped. Then she turned around. "I did not do anything to you. I simply stopped doing everything for you." Daniel stared at her. Then Elinor said something that made the entire room freeze. And tomorrow you will learn what else I changed. She walked upstairs. Behind her the family exchanged terrified looks. They thought the money was gone. They were wrong. The money was still there. But Elinor had discovered something far more valuable. The truth, and the next morning she was going to reveal it. At 7 in the morning, someone knocked on the front door. Elinor already knew who it was. She opened the door and saw a lawyer standing outside with 2 investigators. Daniel rushed downstairs. Who are these people? Elinor looked at him. People who know exactly what you planned. Daniel became pale. The lawyer entered the house and placed a folder on the table. Mrs. Elinor, we have everything you requested. Daniel stepped forward. What is this? The lawyer opened the folder. It contains the financial records of this family for the last 5 years. Rachel covered her mouth. Melissa looked at Daniel. Elinor continued, I wanted to know where my money was going. The lawyer placed another document on the table. There were unauthorized withdrawals, fake signatures, hidden purchases, and payments made from Elinor's account toward a property Daniel had secretly purchased. Daniel stared at the documents. That is not what it looks like. Elinor shook her head. It is exactly what it looks like. Rachel began crying. Mom, I never knew. Elinor looked at her. You knew enough to keep taking the money. Rachel lowered her head. Melissa suddenly stood up. Daniel did everything. Daniel turned toward her. Do not blame me. You told me she would never check. Elinor closed her eyes for a moment. That sentence hurt more than everything else. Her family had not only betrayed her, they had discussed her like she was already gone. The lawyer placed one final document on the table. Daniel looked at it. What is that? Elinor answered the house. Daniel smiled nervously. What about it? It is no longer yours to control. Daniel stopped smiling. I transferred ownership yesterday. To whom? Elinor looked at him. To a charitable foundation. The house will become a shelter for single mothers. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. Rachel started crying harder. Mom, this was our home. Elinor nodded. It was. But you forgot whose home it was. Daniel suddenly reached for the folder. Elinor stepped back. Do not touch that. Daniel froze. The investigators moved closer. Elinor looked at her son for the last time. I spent my entire life protecting you from consequences. Today I stopped. Daniel whispered, Mom, please. Elinor felt tears in her eyes. She had waited years to hear him say please, but she had wanted to hear it when he was a child. Not when he was losing access to her money. She walked toward the door. Daniel followed her. Where are you going? Elinor smiled through her tears. Somewhere peaceful. You will not find me there. Daniel stopped. Elinor continued walking. Outside, she stood in the morning sunlight and took a deep breath. For the first time in decades, she felt free. Weeks passed. The investigation revealed that Daniel had planned to force Elinor out of the house after gaining control of her finances. Melissa had helped him. Rachel had known about parts of the plan and had stayed silent. The family lost everything they had expected to inherit. But Elinor did something they never expected. She did not destroy them. She simply stopped saving them. She opened the doors of her new foundation to women who had nowhere to go. One evening, Elinor stood outside the shelter, watching a young mother carry her sleeping daughter inside. The woman turned around. Thank you. Elinor smiled. You do not have to thank me. The young mother hugged her. Elinor closed her eyes. For years she had believed her family was the reason she had to keep giving. Now she understood the truth. Love does not mean allowing people to use you. Forgiveness does not mean giving someone another chance to hurt you. And family does not mean people who share your blood. Family means people who would never celebrate your downfall. Elinor looked at the new building and smiled. Her children had waited at home for her money. They never expected her to come home with nothing they could take. And that was her greatest revenge. She had taken back her life, and they could never steal it again.